take away the economy from those who rigged it. As I see it, class warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. It's worth it. How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis. Welcome to Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willis, your host. Good morning, Houston. Good morning, Harris County. Good morning to the great state of Texas. And of course, good morning to the United States of America. Good morning to the entire world listening to us through the magic of the internet created by We the People via the ARPANET project. Funded by whom? Funded by you. Look, we got a lot to talk about today, but before we get started, let's move on to the geniuses, los genios en el estudio, in the studio with El Señor Howard Reynolds and Jacques Van Beba.
Well, good morning, Egberto. It is Wednesday morning at the radio, the 12th of March, 2025. And do I have any rants today? I have several of them that I really like to rant on, but I think I will reserve myself this morning. Jack, you got a whole page of wisdom over there. We missed out on our wisdom yesterday, so let's go ahead and get to Jack's wisdom.
All right, Jack.
Good morning, Egberto. How are you?
I'm fine, my brother. Talk to me.
Okay, your headlines. I'm going to go over it for a minute and then add to it. AOC exposes the hypocrisy behind Republican attacks on waste, fraud, and abuse, showing us that the actual fraud is corporate welfare like bloated defense contracts and billionaire tax cuts. The billionaire class is stealing America's wealth from the people to build a corporate war machine. The oligarchs and plutocrats are using this system to create empire for themselves. Trump is elevated to president by corporate interests to deliver the productivity of all people who work and consume to the will of capitalism. Trump ushers in a decline of the American citizen to become serfs, to be ruled, not government. He is selling out the citizen worker to corporate government.
Very nice. I was listening to a speech from Bernie Sanders yesterday, and he says, you would think that having all these billions would be enough. He says, but the fact is, they want it all. The ruling class is what they want to call themselves. The ruling class wants to rule over us, the citizens. And they're doing it. They're absolutely doing it right now. It's the second Gilded Age. And if we don't wake up and stop this consumerism, just how many more days are we going to have of this blackouts? We're going to have some more blackouts? Because I think that it didn't send a real message financially, but it sent a real message like, hey, wait a minute. We see what you're doing here. If you keep this up, we're just going to stop buying stuff, which we need to do.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Look, let me tell you, and that's a magical question. There are more of us by orders of magnitude than there are of them. And we have to realize that the thing about it is if we are kept divided, which is a magic of what they do, then it can happen. And I'm going to start with something you just said about billionaires. How much do they want, or how much what else can they have? Last night when I came up with these topics, right after that, a professor gave me a call. He's in Hawaii. And he said, Egberto, did you get those Substacks that I sent you? And I'm like, no, actually, I did get it. I just hadn't read my list yet to know that he had sent me something. So I started reading last night after I prepared the show and said, oh, wow, I need to, you start getting all this new information. It's like, I need to bring that to our peeps right away. And you kind of started with one of the topics, Howard, that he brought up, and that is what's the matter with billionaires? How America wealthiest sabotage their own prosperity and ours simply to avoid paying taxes. And what I'm doing is this morning I got up early and I'm putting these snippets in the newsletter that Jack just read, the topics that Jack just read off from today's newsletter. I'm adding that to the newsletter because I think these are some important stories. I just want to say that it said, I want to read the first two paragraphs of this guy's Substack newsletter because it blows your mind. It says, as markets reel from the latest Trump induced crisis, and by the way, this is from Adam Bonica. I think he's a professor at one of the Ivy League colleges, if I recall correctly. He said, as markets reel from the latest Trump induced crisis, escalating tariff threats sending shockwaves through global supply chains and stock prices, it's worth asking, why do America's wealthiest individuals continue to support politicians who appear to work against their economic interests? We're not talking about poor people now, we're also talking about billionaires as well. None of this should come as a surprise to GOP supporting billionaires. Trump is doing exactly what he promised during his campaign, sowing chaos and imposing tariffs. He ran explicitly on economic nationalism and trade wars. This isn't a one off agenda. The billionaires who bankrolled his campaign knew or should have known precisely what they were buying, yet they still chose to support policies that have historically hindered their own wealth accumulation. I analyzed over 40 years of Forbes 400 data and found a striking pattern. Billionaire wealth grows significantly faster under Democratic administration by 57.1% average growth compared to Republican ones plus 16.5%. So, as it turns out, when they pay more taxes, when there is a Democratic administration, they do substantially better financially than than again under Democratic rule than under Republican rule. And here's the kicker. The kicker is the reasons they constantly, in the aggregate, support Republicans is they don't want to pay taxes. There is this mental block that paying taxes is giving away something to those who have not earned it, as opposed to the reality that they're giving back some of their own unearned wealth. Because that they have been able to accumulate wealth does not mean that they have earned it. Because as we've expressed so many times before, we have an economic system that actually allows a few to benefit from the excess labor and accumulation and doings of others. If you take a look at the stockholder, the person who buys a stock, they're buying a piece of a company who hires people to do work on their behalf, and they sit back because they were the beneficiary of capital to be able to constantly have that capital grow from the work of others. But we're not taught it in those terms because, again, if we understood how the economy really ran, we would make it a much more collective economy than one that allows a few to accumulate. So that is sort of based on when uh, brother Howard talks about when is the billionaire going to have enough. Well, the billionaire never has enough because again that block uh, against that redistributing of their unearned on their unearned wealth is something anathema to them. So that is one piece right there that my professor brother sent to me. Now, the other thing that he sent was kind of had me feeling a little bit concerned. And it was an article by a guy, his name is Alex Hertz. And it was Death by Democracy. John Adams knew this experiment would fail. And it says in 1814, Adams wrote, there never was a democracy yet, and notice that word, yet, that did not commit suicide. Today, over 210 years later, we must admit that he was right. Today, I am thinking about John Adams, about his timeless and prescient warnings, and his strong willed belief that republic he helped create would eventually destroy itself. In 1814, he wrote, "There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. By popular demand, our democracy committed suicide." And I'm not going to say committed, I'm going to say is committing suicide. And we're hoping that all of you that are listening to me today would be a part of the antidote to clean up that venom that's flowing through our veins right now in such a manner that we arrest that which is doing. Adams wrote, was not prone to optimism. He said, "Democracy has never been so durable as aristocracy or monarchy, but while it lasts, it is more bloody than either." He also said, "It is in vain to say that democracy is less vain, less proud, less selfish, less ambitious, or less avaricious than an aristocracy or monarchy. It is not true, in fact, and nowhere appears in history. Those passions are the same in all men under all form of sinful government, and when unchecked, notice that, when unchecked, produce the same effects of fraud, violence, and cruelty. When clear, prospects are open before vanity, pride, avarice, or ambition. For their easy gratification, it is hard for most considerate philosophers and the most conscientious moralists to to the temptation. What I'm saying here, folks, is and I think he sort of laid that out. It is a matter of whether we accept it or not. Let me throw it to. I want to finish this, but before I'm at a stopping point, so let me throw it to Howard for a second. Howard, come on in.
I wanted to quote Franklin D. Roosevelt here for just a moment. This is
Yes,
a very quotable quote, and was something that we're seeing right now. Is the liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerated the growth of private power to the point where it becomes stronger than the democratic state itself. That, in its essence, is fascism, ownership of government by an individual or a group or any controlling private power. This is what we're seeing again.
yes.
Again, we're seeing this. Do
I
we
am
never
glad you
learn?
brought. I am glad you brought that up because that is so important, and I want you to. I want folks to understand this. Remember when there's always a debate between small government and large government, right? And what I've always said is I wanted government right size, but large enough to be able to not allow any corporation to be bigger or stronger. Think about all those who talk about small government. The idea behind small government is exactly what you just read, Howard. If you have small government, that the private sector, meaning the private corporations, are more powerful than that government in the aggregate, then we get to exactly what Adams talk about when he talks about going back to be normalized to aristocracy, monarchy, and in our case, I'll just call it the structures of capitalism. So thank you for that. That actually added a lot of context, Howard. Thank you for that. Um, let me continue with one other thing that Adam said. He said the everlasting envies, jealousies, rivalries, and quarrels among aristocrats, their cruel rapacities upon the poor, ignorant people, their followers, compel these to set up Caesar, a demagogue, to be a monarch and master. And by the way, this article points out that you have that strong person and then you have the followers. This falls perfectly in place with Trump and MAGA. You remember when I spoke about the Powell memo several times over? And what I said is the existence of the Powell memo, or the reason for the Powell memo, was America was becoming progressive. America was becoming more critically thinking. America was becoming smarter. And as people became smarter, they started asking the questions: why will I tolerate the few using me as a cog to enrich themselves while I can never get ahead unless invited into the club? Why will we tolerate those things? Well, when people become smarter, they don't. And I am proud to say, I remember coming to this country in the 80s and realize this was, I mean, when we talk about the movement and people becoming smart and asking questions, the civil rights, the people who formed the civil rights were like, why will we allow us to be why would we be an underclass to serve when we are just as intelligent, just as wanting, just those questions were asked, and we got civil rights, women's rights. Women said, why the hell are we going to allow just because what we were born with to determine whether we are good, whether we can be successful or not? Women said, to hell with that. I am just as smart as a man. And we and we moved on. And then all the other identities, they don't like to talk about identity politics. All the other identities started asserting themselves. We are not going to allow folks to break us up along these identities that we have. We are just as smart, have the same pain, have the same blood. Why do we allow that? And the Powell memo said, "Oh my God, the people are getting smart. They are starting to understand the con. We can't live with that. We have to infiltrate the churches. We have to infiltrate the media. We have to infiltrate the schools. We have to change the narrative. We've got to burn the books. We can't let them get smart. We got to get rid of those who are saying smart things on TikTok, Instagram, Reels, YouTube Live. How can we allow all of that? So we start by censoring TikTok. We're going to take it away. Well, I tell you what, guys, day after tomorrow, there's this very smart TikToker that, after watching her TikToks for a long time on history and many other things, I decided to contact her, and we made arrangement to do an interview on a lot of the work that she's done. And I'm going to be bringing that to you as well. You know, the intelligence that go into these independent people trying to make us a smarter people, trying to get us to think critically is amazing. So, what Adams have said about democracy and whether democracy can last and not return to its origin, to not its origins, and not return to monarchy or aristocracy, we have got to make that true. We have got to discard the Powell memo. We have got to discard the teachings of the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and all these think tanks that are based on the conservative mantra. And what does the conservative mantra stands for? Status quo or regression. Status quo or regression. We have got to solve those particular problems and make sure that we continue our ascent to knowledge, our ascent to knowing. And you know what, folks? We can. We can. But there's one last caveat. Oh, by the way, I want to interject this before the last caveat. You know, all those things about what DOGE is doing to lay people off? Adam Bonica, the professor, did a regression analysis on what agencies are getting hit and which people are getting laid off. And it turns out, as you would expect, I figured that long time ago. When you talk about USAID, the Department of Education, and other areas, they have concentrated on any areas that regulate the private sector or any area where progressives reign, meaning people that are wanting to improve the lives of others. USAID, Department of Education, CFPB, for people who are regulating the card company, the bankers, etc. those are those are the stations that are getting hit hard. And then, as appeared yesterday on a particular news channel, also, if you notice, it's a thing of decolorizing our government. If you take a look at who got replaced with whom, from the Secretary of Defense to the Joint Chief of Staff to all the heads of different organizations that were not white men, they were all let go and populated with less. Hear this. And all of this is quantifiable and verifiable. When I looked at the data, I was like, oh my God, if you didn't sit down and look at it, and I'm not saying cherry picking data, I'm saying just looking at the data as is. No framing, no banking, no framing, no waiting, just looking at the data. The departments also that got hit are departments with a preponderance of people of color. And we shouldn't discount what one of Donald Trump's lieutenants said. I won't put those in words right now. I'd leave that for another time. But suffice it to say, they are executing as planned. Women, women, the people who tipped it over for Donald Trump, imagine he's coming after you. Rural folk, the people who tipped it over for Donald Trump, he's coming after you. And it's not that he's coming after you, is that you have made yourself the ones that it's easiest for him to start his project with. But lastly, wow, I just got a blink screen. I don't know what caused that one. All right. Lastly, the last piece of that I want to talk about that wasn't supposed to be talked about, but after the professor sent me all this stuff, is about uh, let me put it here. What's worse? The worst thing that can happen right now. Remember when Donald Trump signed all those executive orders? You know what was one of those executive orders that he signed that went over all our heads? He said, if you're a news junkie, you might have noticed mention of the Insurrection Act popping up here and there, only to be quickly forgotten as attention turns to the latest antics of Musk or any number of other shocking developments. But this one is worth a pause. What is the Insurrection Act and why should you care? Among scholars of authoritarianism, invoking the Insurrection Act is pointed to as one of the key steps leading to worst case scenario. Brett Wagner, former professor of national security decision making at the U.S. Naval War College, wrote an op-ed in San Francisco Chronicle explaining what's at stake. The clock is ticking down on a crucial but little noticed part of President Donald Trump's first round of executive orders, the one tasking the secretaries of the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security to submit a joint report within 90 days recommending whether to invoke the Insurrection Act. Are you kidding me? Many of us are now holding our collective breath, knowing that the report and what it contains could put us on the slippery slope toward unchecked presidential power under a man with an affinity for iron fisted dictators. Adding to the suspense was the recent Friday night massacre at the Pentagon, the firing of the nation's top uniformed officers, as removing other perceived guardrails. The top uniformed lawyers at the Army, Navy, and Air Force standing between the president and his long stated intention to declare martial law upon returning to power. Coincidence? I don't think so. I don't think so. Other vacancies waiting to be filled are the top uniformed lawyers for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. the three-star generals responsible for reviewing orders from the commander-in-chief and defense secretary to decide whether they're legal, seeking to remove any doubt as to why the previous officers were removed. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth recently explained that the action was taken preemptively to prevent them from blocking orders that are given by a commander in chief. Thanks for saying the quiet part out loud. Sounds like Trump is well on his way to finding the right yes men this time around. Don't forget, this is a guy that asked one of his generals during the Black Lives Matter protest, can't we just shoot them in the legs? So, folks, I hope you tie all of this together, but we have a lot of work to do to maintain our democracy. It's not over, it's not done. It's still all dependent on this president being popular enough such that those in Congress fear bucking him. And the only solution to all these issues is for his support to fall to such a level that those sycophants that are so scared to buck him realize that not only in 2026, but even in the two elections in Florida and the elections in New York. Remember, if they lose those, the House of Representatives switches. And at that point, much of what this president will want to do would likely become that much more difficult. I hope I tease some of our MAGA brothers and sisters here to realize that yes, you were pawns in a game of the aristocracy, the oligarchy, etc. I hope you see it, and I hope that you do some critical thinking to join the fold in those who realize that you cannot just sit back and watch things happening. And to the Democratic establishment, I hope that all these professors and activists that are doing all this work for you would give you a spine to stop being cowards and speak up and use the platform that you are afforded. You don't have a problem getting on TV. You don't have a problem getting on network TV where you can reach those who watch network TV. Those of us who are activists online, all we can do, I can only reach 500,000 folks or so a month, and there are dozens of us with overlapping audiences that reach that many. Some of us can reach 2-3 million folks. This is a country of 330 million people. Of those, probably 180 something or 200 something thousand voters. And we have to reach all of them, and you have the ability to do so, Democratic establishment. I wrote a paper on Sunday, where I said, and I'm going to play, I kind of articulated that on our 3 o'clock show, where I pointed out there are steps for the Democratic Party and progressive organizations to take, and there are steps for the individuals to take to arrest what is happening here. And we should heed that. It's nothing magical, I said. There are a lot of people are saying it, just one more person saying these things. But it's something that we better look at closely and do something about it. I was going to play the AOC piece, but Patrick is on the line, so you guys come first. Patrick, come on in line one.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, my brother. Talk to me.
We're talking about democracy, oligarchy, the fragility of democracy.
Yeah.
Aristotle is also concerned about democracy, and for these people to have concerns about something doesn't mean that they wanted to avoid it or get rid of it. They understood that it took a lot of maintenance.
Thank you.
Aristotle was the first to coin oligarchy, I believe, and he explained it as the rich and powerful competing against the commons for what they both wanted. And he said that the power will swing back and forth between them. We had the power as the commons before the 80s. We lost it, and it still hasn't swung back. But the understanding of how fast this is happening, the last 4 years, the billionaire class has added 88% to their wealth, which means in 4 years they've almost doubled their wealth.
Mm-hmm.
In that same amount of time, the middle class has lost 8% of their wealth, went from 48% to 42%, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the least earners or the no earners amongst us went from 9% of the holding of the pie to 7% of holding of the pie. That 88% came from the middle class and the poorer class. And
Amen.
as they lose that slice of the pie, they also lose their coercion. And I'd like to point out that AM radio, something that has divided this country, is essentially a 24/7 advertisement for these billionaires. In the same amount of time, actually, I think it was in a 10-year time span, billionaires have contributed almost $200 billion to AM radio. They expect something from that.
Amen.
And talk to your relatives, explain to them that what they're hearing on that radio is hate, and it is designed to separate us, and it is not truthful. It is an advertisement for the ultra wealthy.
Exactly. Let me tell you, Patrick. First of all, I need to thank you for the first thing that you said about Aristotle, and that is, even as we talk about how difficult democracy is, they're not saying democracy cannot be maintained, but that democracy requires a lot of maintenance and engagement. And every time you forget about that, that's where you fail. And I remember during the Obama for America, OFA, and I was a big part of that movement, right? And it was a real grassroots movement at the time. And I remember when it was disbanded into from Obama for America to organizing. I don't remember what it was called then, but it kept the syllables. I was so upset because you could see the corporatization of OFA and what happened when it began to be undermined. People were ecstatic that this grassroots movement was coming to pass. And even with Bernie Sanders, and again, it started before Obama, right? It started with the governor of, I think, that small Midwest town. I don't remember. I can't remember his name right now. But the organizing 50 states, because we were at Netroots when he started that project, that we were going to engage 50 states, and the grassroots in 50 states were going to get together. And you remember that governor that screamed? He didn't really scream, but it sounded like a scream. And he from then he started. I'll remember it later. Anyway, Patrick, I got to go to other calls. I'll see you at 3. But thank you for bringing that up. Democracy is salvageable.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
You too, sir. Anyway, Jimmy, come on in.
Good morning, Roberto. I want to bring in about how vindictive our President Trump is, how he goes against anybody who opposes him or says anything against him.
Mm-hmm.
And the most shocking thing was a week or so ago, he cut off military and intelligence aid to Ukraine. And that's just like saying, well, Russia can have you. I mean, we don't really care about you anymore. Although that was horrible. But finally, yesterday, he reversed that and brought the military aid and the intelligence aid back to Ukraine. So that was a good thing that happened yesterday. But all these tariffs he puts on Canada and so forth, people in Canada are very upset with us. They've been good neighbors with us, and all of a sudden Trump puts these big tariffs on Canada, and it's just shocking how he goes after these people and tries to hurt them. So that's what we're dealing with, a man who is a vindictive leader who wants to punish anybody who opposes him.
Jimmy, you're right. And the thing about it is, we have to not let him succeed, and we can't acquiesce to him. I mean, and what I see too many doing is treating him as if what he's doing is inevitable. And the thing about it, like I constantly say, there are more of us than they are of them. And we should start acting like it. Now, when Patrick talks about what AM radio is doing to our psyche and dividing us and having us fight that which we shouldn't be fighting, we should be fighting our plutocracy or oligarchy, our current president, not each other. And that is what I guess Patrick was alluding to before. Anything else, Jimmy, before I jump to Anthony?
Yeah, one thing I don't think it's a good idea to be not withholding your purchasing power at stores. I think if you stop buying things at these stores, they're gonna have to lay off their employees, so that would be counterproductive.
I think what has to be done is doing it in a selective fashion that doesn't affect most. But here's the thing. One of the things that they hold on us, Jimmy, is the impossibility of acting. Because let's say some of us are not willing to sacrifice, then that means the oligarchy always wins, right? In other words, if if there were if there's some people that say we can't do that because somebody's going to get hurt, right? And we have an oligarchy that is always willing to hurt the masses. Doesn't that create a problem, an existential problem that you would be saying is unsolvable?
Yeah, there's all kind of problems of the Department of Education. I
Hmm.
really wonder what they do for most of our education run by the states and the local governments. So I'm not really sure that a federal Department of Education is necessary.
Okay, that is what they would like you to believe, right? That is a propaganda that they're putting out. Let's talk about what they do. All unification, Title 9, Title 6, all these things that they do to promote uh, equity in schools, to provide lunches, the framework for lunches for schools that affect mostly, again, rural counties, rural places. Those states don't support their own. It is the federal government through a Department of Education that feed kids breakfast in schools, right? That otherwise wouldn't have it. We know that a good breakfast is a beginning of learning, and we can go item for item. What they do when they print that out on Fox News or even on some of these stations is they don't tell you what they do. They just say they don't do anything. But no, my brother, the Department of Education does a lot. And that's why, as it seems like Trump is getting rid of it, now that some of the rural educators are starting to speak up. Anyway, anything else, Jimmy?
Well, yeah, Musk is chopping off a lot of employees. All of a sudden, they're gone, and that's shocking that he can have that kind of power to shut down different departments and lay off a whole bunch of people.
Well,
That's very shocking.
no, it's illegal. Look, what he's doing is illegal. It is whether Congress and the Supreme Court wants to enforce it. The Supreme Court can enforce it and point out that it's illegal because these are eight quasi-independent agencies, or if he disregards the Supreme Court, it is up to the Congress to impeach. But hey, Jimmy, I got to jump to Anthony, and then I really want to get the other piece played. So thank you so kindly for calling, my brother.
Okay, have a good day, Goto. Keep
You
up the
too,
good
brother.
work.
Thank you. Let's go to Anthony. Anthony, come on in.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Talk to me.
I saw a post on social media this weekend from a friend of mine that works at the FBI. She's been there for probably 10, 12 years. And she posted a picture of a box of tissue that one of her coworkers had left her with a Post-it note that was very poignant that basically said, after 35 years, I was forced to retire, and, so good luck. So I interpreted that post as a post from someone that works with the FBI that maybe has seen the light, and because she's MAGA. I've known it for years. She's MAGA. And so I sent her a message, and she's still drinking the Kool-Aid. When I asked her about the layoffs of the top officials in Washington, D.C., she said, yeah, those people, they needed to go. They weren't doing their jobs. And I told her, I said, well, they're not stopping there. There's 55 field offices across the United States, and they've already said they're going to clean house. And she's like, oh, that's not going to happen. That's just, that's basically fake news. So it was kind of a wake-up call to me personally, because I thought maybe when she saw what was going on that she would realize what the deal is, but she's still standing strong. So that tells me that there's people within the FBI that are MAGA, obviously, and they're still standing by, and they're going to be standing by until the day they get their email saying they no longer have a job. So,
And that's it. That's the thing with a lot of folks that have the MAGA mentality, Anthony, and that is the inability to have empathy when it doesn't affect you or your close ones. And sometimes even when it affects your close one, you don't understand. I have relatives that it affected them, and affected their close relative, and to them it's like, well, that is sort of the exception. But here's the thing: the good thing about it is that is not most people. It is a larger percentage of MAGA, but it's not even all MAGA. There's another point, and that is a point of peer pressure, right? A lot of MAGA succumb to peer pressure. They don't have where to land. All they know is what they thought they know. And what I am saying as an activist, a different kind of progressive activist, is I want to give these folks a place to land and a place they can feel, hey, you're not losing it all when you accept that you've seen the light. And that's where I want to go. So, look, I got to play a piece here, Anthony. So let's talk tomorrow. But thank you so kindly for your thought and telling us that story about your friend at the FBI. Because if you talk to her again, give her our show. Tell her to call in and check us out sometime. And even we'd like to hear her point of view. All right.
okay. All righty.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Have a good one. I want to welcome Lee the Bearcat from Austin, Texas, in the chat. Joe from Los Angeles, California, in the chat. Billy Allison Irwin from Summerwood says, I do not believe for 1 minute that Trump's plan is to send Russian troops home. If he proves me wrong, I will become a Trump supporter. Oh, don't do that, Billy. Don't do that, Billy. Anyway, Glenn Ryan, Egberto, why don't you use your platform to promote real progressive policies and not give your vote away for free? Only leverage we have and then hoping for change. Hey, Glenn, I responded to you about our breakfast with Egberto. I don't think you replied. I need to hear from you since this week. I think you said it's your week away from school. So look it up and reply back. We only have a few more days in the week. Let's see what else we got here. Eric Hayes is in the house as well from Kingwood, Atascocita. I want to play this piece here, and then we'll come back and close out. This one is from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Let's go ahead and do that. Yesterday, Elon Musk slipped up and really made it clear that they're going after not only Medicare and not only Medicaid, which is easier to tackle, but they're actually going after Medicare and Social Security. A little bit harder to tackle because there may be some machinations having to go. But watch, if they come close, get ready for them to blow up the filibuster to go ahead and get their goal passed once and for all. So for those of you who think you'll be saved by the filibuster for Medicare and Medicaid, rest assured, if they feel that they've got it, they're going to do it. But you know what Elon Musk is doing is really a fraud. He has most of the people looking at all these people that are being laid off so that you believe those that are supporting the Trump administration, the MAGA folks, will believe, no, he's not really going to touch Social Security. No, he's not going to really touch Medicaid, because look at what he's doing. He's firing a lot of federal government workers where the waste is. Of course, a lot of these workers are also in Timbuktu, Texas, Timbuktu, Mississippi, etc. Some of these smaller communities, they are solely dependent on the wages that the government pays to those federal employees that are giving out food stamps, employees that are giving out Medicaid, etc., right? So they're getting a double whammy by those jobs being lost, and also by eventually losing their SNAP, Medicaid, etc. But Trump doesn't want them to look there yet. He doesn't want them to look there because he needs their support so that Congress will feel they still have the support so that they can pretty much destroy their own people for the sake of giving and transferring all their monies to the top, to the wealthy. Listen to AOC. AOC points out something about federal workers that very few know. And she also points out why it is that they're going after all this money. Check this out.
If you are a fan of Donald Trump and you like to punish yourself by watching my live streams, welcome. I'm still fighting for your health care anyway. If you are MAGA and you're on Social Security, congratulations. Welcome. I'm fighting for your benefits too, because I actually believe that people should age with dignity in this country. I believe that people should have access to health care. We don't, quote unquote, have the money for a better and improved social safety net because we let assholes like Elon Musk gut Medicaid and gut Social Security in order for him to pay for A, his own tax cuts, and B, his own $1 billion in private federal contracts. This guy takes billions and billions of your tax dollars, of your public funds. A lot of tech talks about themselves as tech, but they're really just defense contractors. They're the new Boeing. They're the new Lockheed Martin. They are robbing us of the tiny slivers of what we have left in our collective public social safety net in order to get billion-dollar defense contracts. Because here's the thing. You want to hear another interesting fact? You could fire every single federal worker and it would still be something only like 4% of the federal budget. Where's all the rest of it going? If you actually wanted to go after waste, fraud, and abuse, you would go after defense contractors. But the problem is, those are the guys who are making the money off of cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security.
So yes, if you really, really want to cut, the big low-hanging fruit is our Defense Department. Do we really need a Defense Department whose budget is more than the next 8 countries combined? And do you really think that those F-18s and those carriers cost what our defense industrial complex is charging them? That's the biggest waste and abuse there is. I can't call it fraud because fraud has legal implications, but I can call it waste and abuse. Elon Musk like to call those people on Social Security waste, fraud, and abuse. But somehow there are no charges being filed on anyone. Folks, we have to wake up. We have to go out there and we got to get the job done. We have to make our MAGA brothers and sisters realize that they are the first ones that are going to be fed to the lion. Their flesh are the ones that's going to suffer before anyone else. because they are the ones that are more dependent on government than anyone else. Yes, it'll affect the others as well, but it's coming to Timbuktu, rural America first. So whether it is the post office privatization, which means many of your costs for shipping will go up and the frequency of receiving your mail and packages will go down, whether it is the loss of Medicaid, which means your rural hospitals, more of them will be closing and more of your clinics will be closing, whether it's the loss of jobs in the federal sector that will affect you because all those nursing homes are funded federally, all those offices that give out SNAP, those offices that process your Social Security, those offices that process your Medicaid are given to rural people that are getting good wages that are spent in the rural restaurants and rural places that don't really have a big customer base. So you require well-paid people to keep restaurants with small customer bases open. So they try to prevent you, my MAGA brothers and sisters, from critical thinking because they don't want you to go through the steps. If this happened, then this happened, then that happens. They don't want you to think about that. They just want you to believe that, hey, if government workers get those people that I'm prejudiced against, they're going to lose their jobs. They want to inspire your hate, which blocks out that which actually is going to hurt you. Wake up. Absolutely so. Wake up. Because again, this is not conjecture, folks. This is all, again, like I said, all verifiable stuff, man. All right, my brother Brian. Come on in, Brian. Yeah, it's at 50, just about the time you call. Talk to me, Brian. Okay, there you go.
I'm on. No, I'm on now. Yeah, I'm on now.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, what you're talking about is conjecture, but that's not what I'm going to talk about right now. Everyone that has called in and listened to this program knows that my wife is from Beijing, China. She grew up under communist rule. She was pretty well connected. They ate poppy seeds for dinner, and she was forcibly taken from her family and built tank traps around the city of Beijing when she was 16 years old. So if you don't like this country, there's another country called Cuba, 90 miles south of Key West. Renounce your citizenship and move there. That's all you have to do. And when the wind turns right, you can inflate a balloon and fly back to Florida. Or you can go to Venezuela. I was scheduled to go to Venezuela along with another coworker when Hugo Chavez, his military tried to overthrow him. Jerry Bean was taken from his hotel. They sat on him in like a Jeep, confiscated his phone and his computer, and took him to the airport and said, "Get out or we'll kill you." Is that the type of government you want here? Because it's already established in Venezuela. They walked from Venezuela to get to the United States. You can do the same in a reverse direction. You don't like this country, don't write books about it, about how bad the economic system is. Because there are people that have been there, and they don't like it. And it's a slave mentality when you want the government to tell you what to do. Okay, I'm about done. Go ahead and retort on this.
Notice I left you uninterrupted to say your piece. Why is it that anytime we talk about making a system better for all, the first thing folks like you would say is, why don't you go back? There's a look. Your wife had a bad time in China. China is a communist country. None of us want what's happening in China. None of us want the bad things that's happening under Maduro. But I won't allow you to come and just give bad information about what occurred, what and what didn't occur under Hugo Chavez. I'm not going to let you give roses about what occurs under the United States. Every single government does bad things. We are not immune to that either. Uh, the problem with you, my dear brother Brian, is you live in a glass house. And not only are you living in a glass house, you have the inability thus far. And I hope that as you listen to this program, that you would see that I am not looking to do anything in America that harms people, but instead help all the folk that have been given a bad hand, including yourself. My goal is not to create some government driven communist system. My goal is to create a government, we the people, you hear that, Brian? We the people that are not under the domain, not under the control, not under the will of a corporations whose sole responsibility, as the god of capitalism, Milton Friedman stated, is to the shareholder, not the customer, not the worker. I am
You
here
are
to
truly
say,
brainwashed.
did I interrupt you? Okay, actually, I'm glad for that interruption. What makes me brainwashed? Please give me one sentence of that I said, one thing that I just said that you're in disagreement with.
Is corporation freedom or a
No,
democracy?
it's not a demo. There's nothing democratic about a corp. By look, by definition, a corporation cannot be democratic. It has a hierarchy.
Think about it.
And not only it has a hair, there's brother, there's nothing to think about. A corporation has a hierarchy, and that hierarchy also ultimately ends with the profits of the shareholders in a corporation. That's not up for debate, brother. That's how it works. Corporations are
Which
not
would you rather do?
democracies.
Which would you rather do? Just make things and trade it off and not make a profit?
No,
Would it be just a trade system, a barter system?
no, that's not it at all. Again, I think what you have to do,
Hey,
and
you
I got
do.
it. Oh, okay, stop, Brian. Let me finish my. I made you speak at the entire time, so be quiet and let me speak. Now, we're out of time. Shoot, but here's the deal, brother. Here's the deal. There's nothing that you can say that. Let me jump to the studio real quick before I finish up.
If
Studio.
Brian doesn't like it, what's going on, see, in the other countries, the communist countries, it's coming here, Brian. That's what we're trying to stop. So there you go.
No, you're trying
Thank
to
you.
make it.
Thank you
You're
very
trying
much.
to
Hey,
make
Brian. We'll finish tomorrow, Brian. We'll finish tomorrow. You have a voice here. Anyway, folks, love you all. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter is where the rest of the program is that we didn't get to today. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. If you want to send me an email directly, send it to kpft@politicsdoneright.com. Love you all. Thanks for the calls. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people.